100 facts about how your mind lies to you. For 1, your brain fills in missing visual information automatically. Right now, as you look around, you're not seeing everything that's actually there. What you experience as vision is partly invention. Eyes can only focus sharply on a tiny spot at any moment. Everything else is blurry, but you don't notice blur anywhere. This happens because missing details get filled in automatically. Past experience tells the system what's probably there. Those predictions become what you see. When reading a sentence with a misspelled word, you often miss it completely. The expected spelling appears in your awareness instead of what's actually written. Colours work this way too. A banana in dim lighting reflects brownish light. But it still looks yellow because that's what bananas are supposed to be. Thousands of educated guesses happen every second. The filling helps you navigate quickly. But it also means pure, unedited reality never reaches your awareness. What you see is always a mix of input and prediction. Fact 2. The blind spot exists but goes unnoticed daily. Each eye has a spot where vision is impossible. It's called the blind spot, and it's not small. This gap exists where the optic nerve connects to your eye. No light-detecting cells exist at that connection point. Light hits it, and nothing happens. A blank hole should appear in everything you look at. But you never notice it. The gap gets filled with whatever surrounds it. Looking at a wall, the blind spot fills with more wall. Looking at grass, it fills with grass texture and colour. The filling is so seamless that the gap becomes invisible. Online tests can reveal where your blind spot is, but in daily life, you'll never catch it. The automatic filling is too perfect. Your experience feels complete and gapless, even though it contains a significant hole in every view. Fact 3. Saccadic masking hides eye movement, blurriness. Completely eyes jump constantly, several times each second. These quick jumps are called saccades. During each jump, everything should look like motion blur, but you never see it. This blocking is called saccadic masking. Visual processing shuts down temporarily during eye movements. It's like hitting pause on what reaches awareness. Look at something across the room, then quickly shift to something else. Both objects appeared clear. The blur between them vanished completely. Thousands of these jumps happen daily. Every time you read, scan a room, or look around. Each time the messy motion gets deleted from experience. Without this masking, the world would look shaky and unfocused constantly. Stability is maintained by hiding what actually happens during eye movements. You experience smooth vision because the rough parts are edited out. Fact 4. Memory reconstructs rather than replays events. Accurately, memory doesn't save complete copies of experiences. It stores key details and general impressions, then rebuilds events when needed. Each recall creates a fresh version from stored pieces. This is more like reassembling a description than playing a recording. The reconstruction isn't perfect. Gaps get filled with logical guesses about what probably happened. These guesses become part of the memory. Think about a childhood birthday party. You remember cake, guests, and presents. But are those from that specific party? They might combine elements from several birthdays. Similar events blend together over time. The version you recall feels accurate and complete, but it's often a mixture rather than one pure event. This system works efficiently most of the time, but it means every memory contains both real and invented elements. You can't easily tell which parts are which. Fact 5. False memories form from suggested details. Easily completely invented memories can be created through simple suggestions, and they feel just as real as actual memories. Scientists showed people fake childhood photos that were digitally edited. The photos showed them at events they never attended. After discussing these photos, many people remembered being at those fake events. They didn't remember vaguely. Specific details emerged. What they wore, how they felt, who else was there, all completely invented. This happens because imagination and memory use similar storage. When something is imagined vividly, it gets saved. Later, there's no reliable way to distinguish imagined from experienced. Even simple suggestions work. If someone asks about a broken window at a store, you might start remembering it. Even when no broken window ever existed. The ease of creation is disturbing. Memory feels solid and trustworthy, but it's actually quite vulnerable to suggestion and invention. Fact 6. Source amnesia. forgets where information originally came from. You know many facts, but you probably can't remember where you learned most of them. This is source amnesia. Information gets stored, but the origin fades away. You remember the fact without remembering how it entered memory. Paris is the capital of France. Did you learn that in school? A book? A conversation? Most people can't say for sure. This becomes problematic when you can't remember if information came from reliable sources. A health claim might come from a random post or a medical journal. Later, both feel equally valid. Source amnesia makes misinformation effective. Hear something false repeatedly, and you'll remember it as true. The unreliable source is forgotten while the false claim remains. All stored information gets treated equally once source details fade. A rumor and a fact sit in memory without labels. Both feel like knowledge. Fact 7. Cryptomnesia makes you claim others' ideas. Unknowingly. Sometimes you have what feels like an original thought. Later you realize someone else said it first. This is cryptomnesia, or hidden memory stealing. The information was remembered, but the source was forgotten. The idea resurfaces feeling original and new. This isn't intentional theft. You genuinely believe the thought came from you. The memory of hearing it elsewhere has completely vanished. Musicians sometimes write melodies similar to songs they've heard before. Writers create plots resembling books they once read. They're not copying deliberately. Stored ideas resurface without source tags attached. Students do this with essay writing. Phrases from readings reappear in their work. They don't realize they're using someone else's words. In their mind, they're just writing what they know. Every piece of information doesn't carry a permanent label showing its origin. Knowledge can resurface later feeling completely original. Credit goes to you for ideas that were never yours. Fact 8. Childhood amnesia erases memories before age 3. Most people cannot remember anything from before age 3. Some people's first clear memory comes even later, around 5 or 6. This happens because certain structures needed for long-term memory are still developing. Early experiences don't get stored in ways that allow later adult retrieval. You definitely had experiences as a baby and toddler. You learned to walk and talk. You explored and played. But most of these didn't convert into accessible memories. While some individuals report early memories, detailed recollections from before age 3 are uncommon. These may sometimes blend with family stories or impressions from old photos. The system creates memory-like images based on what you were told happened. These feel real, but they're often reconstructions rather than direct recordings from that time. Memory development varies between individuals. Some people retain fragments from earlier than others, but complete detailed memories from infancy remain rare in most cases. Fact 9. Flashbulb memories feel vivid. Despite containing major errors, memories of shocking events feel incredibly clear and detailed. They're called flashbulb memories because they seem frozen like photographs. People remember exactly where they were during major news events, who they were with, what they wore, even the weather. The clarity feels absolute. These memories feel more accurate than ordinary ones. The detail and vividness create strong confidence. But research shows they're just as flawed as any other memory. Scientists asked people to describe memories of shocking events immediately after they happened. Then they asked again months or years later. Later versions differed significantly from original descriptions. People changed major details without realizing it, but confidence in accuracy remained high. Vividness doesn't equal accuracy. Emotional memories get stored with more intensity. The feeling of clarity is strong, but details are still reconstructed each time, and reconstruction always introduces errors. Fact 10. Imagination. Inflation turns imagined events into false memories. The more vividly you imagine something, the more real it feels. Eventually, imagination can become indistinguishable from memory. This is imagination inflation. Imagining an event makes it familiar. Familiarity tricks the system into treating it as a real memory. In studies, people were asked to imagine childhood events that never happened. They pictured details vividly. Where were you? Who was there? What did it look like? After imagining these fake events repeatedly, people started believing they were real. They added details beyond the original description. Confidence grew with each imagining session. This happens because imagination and memory use similar processes. Detailed imagination gets encoded almost like real experience. Later, distinguishing between them becomes impossible. Repeatedly thinking about something makes it feel more like memory. The more vivid the imagination, the stronger this effect becomes. Reality and imagination blur together. Fact 11. Confirmation. Bias seeks only. Evidence supporting existing beliefs information doesn't get processed fairly. Preference goes to information agreeing with what's already believed. This is confirmation bias. When encountering new information, automatic sorting happens. Does this support what I think? Probably true. Does this contradict what I think? Probably wrong. This happens unconsciously. Evidence confirming beliefs gets noticed and remembered. Evidence challenging them gets ignored or forgotten. Believing a certain diet is healthy means noticing all the success stories. Studies showing problems get skipped over. Reading gets filtered to match existing views. This applies to opinions about people too. If someone seems trustworthy, their actions get interpreted positively. If they seem dishonest, identical actions appear suspicious. Changing your mind becomes extremely difficult. You're constantly feeding yourself evidence that you're already right. Contradictory information barely registers. Beliefs strengthen over time, even when wrong. Fact 12. Availability, heuristic judges, frequency by recall ease. How common something seems depends on how easily examples come to mind. This is the availability heuristic. Examples coming to mind quickly makes the thing seem frequent. Struggling to think of examples makes it seem rare. This sounds logical but creates major errors. Dramatic events are easier to remember, so dramatic events seem more common than they actually are. Plane crashes get massive coverage. Car accidents barely get mentioned, so plane crashes come to mind instantly when thinking about travel safety. Flying seems dangerous, but statistically, driving is far more dangerous. Individual car accidents just can't be recalled easily. They blend into background noise. This happens with crime perception too. Recent news about robberies makes you overestimate local robbery rates. Ease of recall tricks you into thinking frequency is high. Fact 13. Representativeness. Heuristic ignores statistical base. Rates. Completely probability gets judged by how well something matches a read stereotype. Actual statistical likelihood gets ignored completely. This is the representativeness heuristic. If something fits a mental image, it probably belongs to that category according to automatic judgment. Someone is quiet, organized, and loves reading. Is this person more likely a librarian or farmer? Most people say librarian. The description matches the librarian stereotype perfectly, but farmers vastly outnumber librarians. Statistically, this person is more likely a farmer who happens to be quiet. Base rates get ignored. Focus stays on how well the description matches the mental image. The stereotype feels more important than actual numbers. This happens constantly in daily judgments. People and situations get assessed based on representativeness. Consideration of how common or rare things actually are gets forgotten. Fact 14. Conjunction. Fallacy makes specific scenarios seem more probable. Detailed stories feel more likely than simple ones. This is backwards from how probability actually works. Adding details to a scenario makes it less likely mathematically, but specific stories feel more believable. Automatic judgment gets fooled. Linda is described as a philosophy major concerned with social justice who participated in protests. Which is more likely? Linda is a bank teller, or Linda is a bank teller active in the feminist movement? Most people choose the second option. Details match the description better. It feels like a more complete picture, but mathematically, the second option is less probable. It's more specific. Feminist bank tellers are a subset of all bank tellers. Adding details always reduces probability. Coherent narratives get preferred over statistical truth. Good stories feel more likely than simple facts. This makes you vulnerable to detailed but improbable explanations. Fact 15. Anchoring effect traps. Numerical estimates near initial values. The first number you hear becomes a mental anchor. All later estimates stay close to it, even when the first number was random. This is the anchoring effect. Once a number enters thinking, it influences everything after. You can't escape its pull, even knowing it's meaningless. In one experiment, People spun a wheel landing on random numbers. Then they estimated the percentage of African countries in the United Nations. People who spun higher numbers gave higher estimates. The random spin influenced serious answers. This happens in negotiations constantly. First price mentioned becomes the anchor. If a seller starts high, the final price tends to stay higher. If a buyer offers low first, the final price drops. The anchor becomes a reference point. Adjustment happens from there. But adjustment is never enough. You stay too close to the initial number, even trying to correct for it. Fact 16. Framing effect changes decisions based on word choice. How information is presented changes decisions, even when facts stay identical. This is the framing effect. A surgery having a 90% survival rate sounds good. The same surgery having a 10% death rate sounds scary. Statistics are identical. Emotional reaction differs completely. People choose differently based on these frames. Told about survival rates, more people choose surgery. Told about death rates, fewer want it. Numbers didn't change, only words. This works with products too. Ground beef labelled as 75% lean sells better than beef labelled 25% fat. Same product, different frame. Emotional tone of words gets reacted to before information gets processed. Positive framing creates positive feelings. Negative framing creates negative feelings. Those feelings drive choices. Advertisers and politicians use this constantly. Information gets framed to push towards certain decisions. Facts remain true, but presentation manipulates response. Fact 17. Loss aversion makes losses hurt. Twice. As much. Losing something hurts more than gaining the same thing feels good. This is loss aversion, one of the strongest judgment biases. If you lose $20, you feel bad. If you find $20, you feel good. But pain of losing is roughly twice as strong as pleasure of finding. This affects decisions constantly. You'll work harder to avoid losing something than to gain something of equal value. Fear of loss overpowers hope of gain. People stay in bad jobs because leaving feels like losing stability. They keep failing investments because selling feels like admitting loss. Pain of loss weighs heavier than potential gain from change. This isn't rational. Loss and gain of equal size should matter equally. But evolution made us more sensitive to losses. In survival situations, losing resources was more dangerous than gaining them was beneficial. Now this instinct affects modern decisions where stakes aren't life or death. That ancient fear of loss still dominates. Fact 18. Sunk cost fallacy throws good resources after bad. You've already spent time or money on something. It's not working out, but you keep going anyway. This is the sunk cost fallacy. Past investment is gone. You can't get it back whether you continue or quit. The only thing that matters is whether continuing makes sense going forward, but automatic thinking doesn't see it that way. Waste feels wrong. The past investment should mean something, so more gets invested hoping to justify what's already been spent. You sit through boring movies because you paid for tickets. You finish meals you don't like because you ordered them. You stay in degree programs you hate because you've already completed 2 years. Ticket money is gone either way. Meals are paid for. 2 years are spent. Continuing doesn't change the past, but walking away feels wrong. This fallacy keeps people in bad relationships, failing businesses, and poor investments. They're trying to rescue past decisions that can't be rescued. Fact 19. Decoy effect manipulates preferences using strategically inferior options. Adding a bad option can make you choose something you wouldn't have picked otherwise. This is the decoy effect. Imagine choosing between two products. Option A costs less but has fewer features. Option B costs more but has more features. You're torn. Now add option C. It's priced the same as option B but has fewer features. Suddenly option B looks amazing. It's clearly better than option C for the same price. You end up choosing option B, even though adding option C shouldn't change anything, but it does. The bad option made the expensive option look like better value. Businesses use this all the time. Movie theaters offer 3 popcorn sizes. Medium is barely cheaper than large. Medium exists to make large seem like better value. Automatic comparison happens between options, not against absolute standards. A strategically placed bad option shifts entire perception. You think you're making a smart choice, but you've been nudged. Fact 20. Choice overload. Paralyzes decision-making with excessive options. More choices should make you happier. Actually, too many choices make deciding harder and leave you less satisfied. When you have 2 or 3 options, deciding is easy. Quick comparison leads to a pick, but when you have 20 or 30 options, the system struggles. More options mean more comparisons, more information to process, more chance of missing the best one. So instead of feeling empowered, you feel overwhelmed. Studies show people are less likely to buy anything when given too many choices. Grocery stores with 6 jam varieties sell more than stores with 24 varieties. Abundance creates paralysis. Even after choosing, you feel worse. With so many options, worry about picking wrong increases. Maybe another option would have been better. This regret wouldn't exist with fewer choices. Evolution prepared us for simple choices: hunt or gather, fight or flee. Modern life presents hundreds of options daily. The decision system wasn't built for this volume. It overloads and shuts down. Fact 21. Decision fatigue depletes mental resources. After repeated choices, every decision uses mental energy. After making many decisions, the capacity for good choices drops. This is decision fatigue. Decision quality drops as the day progresses. Early decisions might be thoughtful and careful. Later decisions become impulsive or you avoid them entirely. Judges show this clearly. Studies found judges grant parole more often early in the day. After lunch, they're more likely to grant it again. Late afternoon, most requests get denied. The judges aren't being unfair deliberately. Their capacity for careful judgment exhausts from making decisions all day. When fatigued, defaulting to the easier choice happens automatically. For judges, that means denying parole. You experience this too. You eat healthy all day, then have ice cream at night. You're patient with kids in the morning, then snap at them before bed. Willpower depletes. Each choice drains a shared resource. Big decisions drain more. Small decisions add up. By evening, the tank is empty and choices suffer. Fact 22. Halo effect spreads. One positive trait. Across all. When you notice one good quality in someone, automatic assumptions spread to other qualities. This is the halo effect. You meet someone well-dressed and articulate. Automatic assumptions follow. They're also intelligent, trustworthy, and competent. No evidence exists for these other traits, but the positive first impression spreads. This happens with brands too. Like one product from a company, and assumptions about their other products improve. One positive experience creates a glow covering everything else. Teachers fall for this constantly. Students who are neat and polite get better grades on subjective assignments. The teacher assumes good handwriting means good thinking. The positive trait transfers where it shouldn't. The effect works in reverse too. One negative trait can cast a shadow over everything else. This is sometimes called the horn effect. A single flaw makes assumptions about other flaws. Desire for consistency drives this. If someone seems good in one way, they should be good in other ways too. Reality is messier, but automatic judgment prefers simplicity. Fact 23. Physical attractiveness. Bias assumes beauty equals competence. Attractive people get treated better in almost every situation. Automatic assumptions link appearance with intelligence, kindness, and capability. This bias starts in childhood. Teachers give attractive students higher grades for identical work. They're called on more in class and given more attention and encouragement. In job interviews, attractive candidates get hired more often with identical qualifications. They're offered higher starting salaries. They get promoted faster throughout careers. Juries are more lenient with attractive defendants. They receive shorter sentences for identical crimes. Assumptions about guilt are lower from the start. None of this is conscious. People don't think they're treating attractive people better, but study after study shows they do. Automatic systems link beauty with positive qualities. This is called the "what is beautiful is good" stereotype. It's completely unfounded, but shapes countless decisions daily. Appearance influences outcomes that should be based purely on merit. Fact 24. First impressions form. Within 7 seconds of meeting, judgment about someone forms almost instantly. Within 7 seconds of meeting them, a conclusion has been reached that's hard to change later. This happens before real conversation starts. Body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, and appearance get read. All this packages into a quick judgment. Studies show these snap judgments are remarkably stubborn. Even when someone acts differently than the first impression suggested, new behavior gets interpreted to match the initial judgment. If the first impression was positive, mistakes get excused as rare exceptions. If it was negative, good behavior seems fake or temporary. This creates a major problem. 7 seconds isn't enough time to truly know anyone. Judgment based on superficial signals gets locked in as if it's reliable information. Job interviews often depend on these first few seconds. Dates do too. Actual qualities matter less than the immediate impression created. Once formed, that impression filters everything that comes after. Fact 25. Serial position, curve, shows. Memory peaks at extremes. You remember the beginning and end of a list much better than the middle. This is called the serial position curve. When someone tells you a list of items, the first few come back easily. The last few also return, but middle items, they mostly disappear. First items benefit from extra processing time. They get more attention because nothing came before them. This is the primacy effect. Last items are still in short-term storage when recall is attempted. They haven't had time to fade yet. This is the recency effect. Middle items get squeezed. They don't get the focused attention of first items. They've also faded more than recent items, so they vanish. This affects presentations and conversations. Want people to remember something? Say it first or last. Never bury important information in the middle. Your audience will forget it exists. The same pattern shows up in job interviews. Interviewers remember first and last candidates best. Middle candidates fade into a blur. Fact 26. Hindsight bias creates the I knew it all along feeling. After something happens, you feel like you predicted it all along. You didn't. This is hindsight bias. Once an outcome is known, memory of what was thought beforehand gets rewritten. Past predictions adjust to match what actually occurred. When a company fails, people say they saw it coming. When a couple divorces, friends claim they always knew it wouldn't work. After elections, both sides insist the result was obvious. But if you had asked these people beforehand, they would have been uncertain. They might have predicted differently. Once the outcome arrived, memory changed to include certainty that wasn't there. This bias makes learning from mistakes harder. Believing you predicted something means you won't study why you actually missed it. Judgment can't improve if you think it was already correct. History books suffer from this constantly. Events seem inevitable when reading backwards, but people living through them face genuine uncertainty. Hindsight creates false predictability. Fact 27. Outcome bias judges decision quality by results alone. Whether a decision was good gets judged by how it turned out, not whether it made sense at the time. This is outcome bias. A gambler bets everything on a single roulette number and wins. Was that a good decision? Automatic judgment says yes because it worked, but it was still terrible decision-making. They just got lucky. A surgeon chooses a risky procedure and the patient survives. Everyone praises the decision. But if the patient had died from the same choice, blame would fall on the surgeon. Decision quality didn't change, only the result. This bias makes evaluating past choices nearly impossible. Decision and outcome can't be separated. Good decisions with bad luck look wrong. Bad decisions with good luck look brilliant. In business, leaders who took foolish risks get celebrated if they succeeded. Leaders who made smart, safe choices get criticized if circumstances turned against them. Quality of thinking doesn't matter as much as random outcomes. This prevents learning. Risky strategies that happen to work get repeated. Sound strategies that faced bad luck get abandoned. Fact 28. Dunning-Kruger effect gives beginners unwarranted overconfidence. When first learning something, confidence feels very high. You think you know more than you do. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect. Beginners don't know what they don't know. They've learned a few basics and assume that's most of what matters. Vast complexity beyond their knowledge is invisible. Someone takes a weekend photography course and thinks they're ready to shoot weddings. Someone reads a few articles about economics and argues with experts. The small amount learned feels like mastery. As real expertise develops, confidence often drops. Discovery happens about how much remains unknown. Nuance and complexity that were missed as a beginner become visible. True experts tend to be more humble. The graph looks like a curve. Confidence spikes early with minimal knowledge. It drops as learning progresses and depth of the subject becomes clear. It gradually rises again with genuine expertise, but never as high as that initial beginner spike. This makes beginners difficult to teach. They don't think they need help. They're confident they've already figured it out. Fact 29. Imposter syndrome makes skilled people doubt their abilities. Some highly accomplished people feel like frauds. They believe they're not actually qualified. They think they've fooled everyone. This is imposter syndrome. These aren't beginners. Proven track records exist. Awards, publications, successful projects. But success gets attributed to luck, timing, or tricking people. Genuine skill can't be accepted. Constant fear of being exposed exists. Someone will eventually realize they don't belong. This causes enormous anxiety despite objective achievements. Imposter syndrome often affects people who succeeded non-traditionally. They didn't follow the standard path, so they feel illegitimate. It also affects people from underrepresented groups facing stereotypes about their abilities. The feeling persists despite evidence. More success doesn't cure it. Each achievement gets dismissed as another lucky break. Belief in fraudulence becomes self-reinforcing. This is the opposite of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Instead of beginners feeling overconfident, experts feel underconfident. Both biases prevent accurate self-assessment, just in opposite directions. Fact 30. Spotlight effect. Overestimates how much others notice you. You think people are paying much more attention to you than they actually are. This is the spotlight effect. When you have a stain on your shirt, it feels like everyone sees it. When you say something awkward, it seems like everyone will remember forever. But most people barely notice. Everyone is too focused on themselves to watch you closely. They're worried about their own stains and awkward moments. Your embarrassing moment is background noise in their day. Studies tested this directly. Researchers had people wear embarrassing t-shirts to parties. Wearers estimated half the room would notice. In reality, less than a quarter did. This effect makes social anxiety worse. Belief in constant scrutiny develops. Mistakes seem obvious to everyone, but you're just not that important to other people's attention. The same applies to successes. You think people noticed your great presentation or clever comment. Most didn't. They were thinking about their own concerns. The spotlight you feel is mostly in your own mind. Fact 31. Illusion of transparency makes internal feelings seem obvious. You think emotions are obvious to everyone around you. They're not. This is the illusion of transparency. When nervous, it feels written all over your face. When lying, you're sure everyone can tell. When annoyed, it seems completely apparent. But internal states are mostly hidden. Other people can't see racing hearts or anxious thoughts. Faces show much less than believed. Studies show this gap clearly. People rate their own emotions as very visible. Outside observers rate those same emotions as subtle or unnoticeable. What feels obvious internally is invisible externally. This works both ways. You also overestimate how well you read other people. You think you know what they're feeling based on small clues. You're probably wrong more often than realized. The illusion comes from how intensely you experience your own emotions. They feel so strong that they must be obvious. But feelings are internal experiences. They don't broadcast as clearly as they seem to. Fact 32. Mind reading. Bias assumes you know others' thoughts. You think you can accurately guess what other people are thinking. You probably can't. This is mind-reading bias. When someone doesn't respond to your text, you assume they're angry. When a coworker is quiet, you decide they don't like you. When your friend cancels plans, you conclude they're avoiding you, but you're just guessing. No actual access to their thoughts exists. They might be busy, tired, or dealing with something completely unrelated to you. Automatic filling happens for the blanks. Stories get created about their mental state based on minimal evidence. Then those stories get treated as fact. This causes unnecessary conflict. Response happens to what you think someone is thinking, not what they actually said. Upset develops about intentions they never had. The bias gets stronger with people you know well. Familiarity creates assumptions about mind-reading ability. But even close relationships don't give you telepathy. Other people's thoughts are more complicated and different from yours than imagined. Guesses about their inner world are often just projections of your own fears and assumptions. Fact 33. Fundamental attribution error. Blames personality over situational factors. When someone does something wrong, their character gets blamed. When you do something wrong, the situation gets blamed. This is the fundamental attribution error. Someone cuts you off in traffic. They're a reckless, selfish person. You cut someone off. You had a legitimate reason. You were distracted or in a hurry. Someone fails a test. They must be lazy or unintelligent. You fail a test. The questions were unfair or you were having a bad day. Automatic thinking underestimates how much situations control behavior. It overestimates how much personality matters. When observing others, the action is visible, but context isn't. You don't know what someone was dealing with that day. Maybe they just received bad news. Maybe they didn't sleep. Maybe they're struggling with problems you can't see. But instead of considering these possibilities, jumping to conclusions about who they are as a person happens. Permanent judgments get made based on temporary situations. You give yourself context and nuance. You deny it to others. This double standard damages how you perceive and judge people around you. Fact 34. Just world hypothesis believes people get what they deserve. Automatic thinking wants to believe the world is fair. Good things happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. This is the just world hypothesis. When something bad happens to someone, automatic thinking asks what they did to deserve it. They must have made a mistake. They must have done something wrong. This protects sense of safety. If bad things only happen because of bad choices, then staying safe by making good choices is possible. The world feels more predictable and controllable, but the world isn't actually fair. Random bad things happen to good people constantly. Innocent people suffer. Hard work doesn't always pay off. This bias makes you blame victims. Someone gets robbed, and questions arise about why they were in that neighborhood. Someone gets sick, and wondering about lifestyle choices happens. You're not being cruel deliberately. Automatic thinking needs to believe they had control, because if they didn't, then you don't have control either, and that's frightening. The just world hypothesis lets you feel safe by being unfair to others. Illusion of control gets maintained by blaming people for circumstances beyond their control. Fact 35. Self-serving bias credits success. To you but externalizes failure. When things go well, you did it. When things go badly, something else caused it. This is self-serving bias. You ace a test. You're smart and studied hard. You fail a test. Questions were unfair or the teacher didn't explain properly. Your team wins. Your contribution was essential. Your team loses. Teammates didn't perform or conditions were bad. Self-image gets protected automatically by taking credit for success and deflecting blame for failure. This happens unconsciously. The bias extends beyond your own actions. If your child succeeds, it's good parenting. If they struggle, it's the school system or peer pressure. This prevents learning from mistakes. If failures are always caused by external factors, examining what you could have done differently never happens. Improvement is impossible if you're not at fault. It also creates relationship problems. Credit gets taken in group efforts. Others feel their contributions get ignored. Meanwhile, blame falls on them when things fail. Protecting ego is more interesting to automatic systems than accurate self-assessment. Fact 36. Cognitive dissonance creates mental discomfort. From contradictory beliefs. When two contradictory beliefs are held simultaneously, uncomfortable tension results. This discomfort is called cognitive dissonance. You believe you're a good person, you also did something you know was wrong. These two thoughts clash. The clash feels unpleasant. The discomfort feels almost physical. Quick resolution is wanted. So one of the beliefs changes to make them fit together. Usually the belief protecting self-image gets kept. The other belief adjusts. Maybe what you did wasn't actually that bad. Maybe everyone does it. Maybe you had a good reason. You smoke cigarettes, but no smoking causes cancer. That creates dissonance. So research might get downplayed, or telling yourself you'll quit soon, or focusing on someone who smoked and lived to 90. The dissonance pushes toward either changing behavior or changing beliefs. Changing behavior is hard. Changing beliefs is easier. So beliefs usually twist to justify actions. This keeps you from facing uncomfortable truths. The mind protects itself by reshaping understanding rather than admitting fault. Fact 37. The recency illusion makes new things seem like sudden trends. When you first notice something, it suddenly seems to be everywhere. This is the recency illusion. You learn a new word, then hear it constantly for the next week. You buy a certain car model, then see that same car everywhere on the road. The thing didn't actually become more common. Your attention changed. Once something enters awareness, you start noticing it where it was always present but previously invisible. This creates false impressions about trends. A behavior or phrase seems to be spreading rapidly. Really, it's been happening all along. You just became aware of it. The illusion affects how you perceive language change. A certain usage seems new and suddenly everywhere. Checking older texts often reveals it's been around for decades. You just started noticing. Social media amplifies this. Seeing several posts about something makes it seem like a major trend. But you're just seeing what algorithms decided to show you. The actual prevalence hasn't changed. Awareness and frequency get confused. What's new is your attention, not the phenomenon itself. But the feeling of sudden emergence is powerful and convincing. Fact 38. The pratfall effect makes perfect people seem less likable. Highly competent people become more likable when they make small mistakes. This is the pratfall effect. Someone appears perfect in every way. Then they spill coffee or mispronounce a word. Their likability actually increases. The minor flaw makes them seem more human and relatable. This only works for people already seen as competent. If someone seems incompetent, mistakes make them even less appealing. The effect depends on baseline perception. Studies showed participants videos of people answering quiz questions. Some subjects spilled coffee during the video. Highly successful quiz takers became more likable after spilling. Poorly performing quiz takers became less likable. The effect happens because perfection creates distance. People struggle to relate to someone who seems flawless. A small humanizing mistake closes that gap. Politicians sometimes use this deliberately. A calculated minor flaw makes them seem more authentic. The key is that the flaw must be small and the competence well established. Perfect is intimidating. Slightly flawed perfection is relatable. Automatic social judgment responds more positively to the latter. Fact 39. The Ben Franklin effect makes favours increase liking. If someone does you a favour, they end up liking you more. This seems backwards, but it's real. This is the Ben Franklin effect. You'd expect that doing favours for someone makes you like them more. Actually, having someone do a favour for you makes them like you more. This happens because of cognitive dissonance. After doing you a favour, their mind asks why they did it. The answer, I must like this person. Otherwise, why would I help them? The action came first, then the mind created a justification. That justification was liking, and that feeling becomes real. Ben Franklin reportedly used this. He wanted to win over a rival. Instead of doing the rival a favour, Franklin asked the rival to lend him a rare book. The rival did, and became friendlier afterward. This works because behaviour shapes beliefs. People assume their actions reflect their feelings. If they acted helpful toward you, they must feel positively about you. Want someone to like you? Don't just help them. Ask them to help you. Their assistance will change how they feel about you. Fact 40. IKEA effect overvalues. Items you assembled yourself. Things you build yourself feel more valuable than identical things built by others. This is the IKEA effect. When you assemble furniture, bake a cake, or create anything, attachment develops. Effort becomes part of value in the automatic judgment. Your homemade bookshelf isn't objectively better than a factory-made one. It might actually be worse. But to you, it feels more valuable because you made it. Studies tested this with IKEA furniture specifically. People who assembled furniture themselves valued it almost as much as expert-built furniture. People who just bought pre-assembled furniture valued it much less. Effort creates emotional investment. That investment translates to perceived value. The more work something required, the more the result gets overvalued. This applies beyond physical objects. You overvalue your own ideas because effort went into creating them. You defend your children's artwork more than strangers' artwork of equal quality. The effect makes you blind to flaws. Creations get seen through effort-tinted lenses. Others see objectively and notice problems you've overlooked. Labour has biased judgment. Fact 41. Endowment effect makes owned possessions feel more valuable. Once something is owned, it gets valued more than before owning it. This is the endowment effect. Before owning an object, thinking happens about what you'd pay for it. After owning it, thinking shifts to what you'd accept to sell it. That second number is always higher. People demand more money to give up items they own than they'd pay to acquire identical items. Simply owning something increases its value in automatic judgment. Researchers demonstrated this with coffee mugs. People given mugs demanded twice as much money to sell them as people were willing to pay to buy identical mugs. The effect happens instantly. Ownership creates attachment within minutes. Something becomes yours and extra worth gets assigned. This makes negotiations difficult. Sellers think their items are worth more than buyers think. Both sides feel the other is being unreasonable. But both are experiencing the same bias from different positions. You're also reluctant to throw things away because of this. Old possessions feel valuable simply because they are owned. Getting rid of them feels like losing something precious, even when it's just clutter. Fact 42. Status quo. Bias resists change. Even when beneficial preference exists for things to stay the way they are, even when change would help. This is status quo bias. The current situation feels safe and familiar. Change feels risky and uncertain. So automatic thinking defaults to keeping things the same. You stay at a job you dislike because finding a new one requires effort and risk. You keep the same bank account even when others offer better rates. You stick with default settings on devices instead of customizing them. This happens with choices too. When presented with options, overwhelming choice happens for whatever is marked as the default, even when all options are clearly explained. One study looked at organ donation. In countries where donation is the default and you must opt out, nearly everyone is a donor. In countries where you must opt in, very few people are donors. Same decision, different default, completely different outcomes. Change requires active decision-making. Staying the same requires nothing. Automatic thinking prefers the path of least resistance. So the status quo wins, even when it's worse than alternatives. Fact 43. Denomination effect makes large bills. Harder to spend money in large bills feels more valuable than the same amount in small bills. This is the denomination effect. You're more hesitant to break a $50 bill than to spend 5 $10 bills. The total is identical, but spending feels different. Studies show people spend less when they have large denominations. They're more likely to spend if money is broken into smaller bills. The large bill feels like a unified whole. Breaking it feels like a bigger decision. Small bills feel already broken, so spending them seems less significant. This affects everyday decisions. Having a $100 bill makes you more conservative with purchases than having 5 20s. The denomination changes spending behavior even though value is the same. Casinos know this. They use chips instead of cash, partly because chips don't trigger the same spending resistance. The denomination effect works with physical form, not just number. If you want to save money, keep it in large bills. If you want to spend, break it into small denominations. The form influences behavior independent of amount. Fact 44. Planning fallacy. Chronically underestimates how long tasks take. Tasks consistently take longer than estimated. This is the planning fallacy, and you probably experienced it today. You estimate a project will take 2 hours. It takes 4. You think homework will finish in 30 minutes. It takes over an hour. You plan to leave in 5 minutes. You leave in 15. This happens with every type of task. Small errands, major projects, creative work, household chores. Estimates are almost always too optimistic. The fallacy persists even with knowledge of it. Past projects taking longer than expected are remembered. But conviction develops that this time will be different. Automatic thinking imagines the best-case scenario when planning. Everything goes smoothly. No interruptions. No unexpected problems. Peak efficiency the whole time. Reality never matches this fantasy. Interruptions happen. Problems arise. Energy fluctuates. But these don't factor into estimates. Groups fall for this too. Teams underestimate project timelines just as badly as individuals. Adding more people to planning doesn't fix the bias. The fallacy causes chronic lateness, missed deadlines, and rushed work. Plans get built on optimistic fiction, not realistic assessment. Fact 45. Optimism. Bias expects better, personal outcomes than statistics. Bad things seem less likely to happen to you than to other people. This is optimism bias, and statistics say you're wrong. Most people believe they're less likely than average to get divorced, have accidents, or develop diseases. Mathematically, this is impossible. Not everyone can be better than average. The divorce rate is known to be high. But confidence exists that your marriage will last. Car accidents are known to be common, but sureness exists that you're a safer driver than most. This bias helps take risks and make long-term plans. Without it, fear might prevent trying anything. Some optimism is healthy, but it also creates under-preparation for problems. Not enough money gets saved because assumptions exist that financial trouble won't happen. Health issues don't get planned for because those happen to other people. The bias gets stronger with serious threats. The worse the outcome, the more conviction develops that it won't happen to you. Automatic thinking protects from anxiety by distorting probability. You're not special. Risk is roughly the same as everyone else's. But automatic thinking won't let you believe that. It insists you're the exception. Fact 46. Illusion of control. Overestimates influence over random events. Belief exists that more control over outcomes exists than actually does. This is the illusion of control, affecting random events most strongly. People think they can influence dice rolls by throwing harder or softer. Gamblers believe they can sense when a slot machine is ready to pay out. Lottery players think their number selection strategy matters. None of these actions change the odds. But they feel like they do. Taking action creates a sense of control, even when that control is imaginary. This extends to non-random situations too. Belief exists that other people's opinions can be controlled by arguing better. Belief exists that rituals affect outcomes in sports or tests. The illusion is strongest with personal involvement. Pressing the elevator button yourself feels more effective than watching someone else press it. Both actions are equally useless if the button was already pressed. Automatic thinking craves control. When faced with randomness or uncertainty, control gets invented where none exists. This feels better than accepting powerlessness. The illusion drives superstitious behavior. If certain socks happen to be worn when something good happened, automatic thinking links the socks to success. Now they're lucky socks. Fact 47. Superstitious behavior links unrelated actions to random outcomes. Actions get connected to outcomes even when no real relationship exists. This creates superstitious behavior. A student wears a specific shirt to an exam and does well. Now that's their lucky exam shirt. An athlete follows a routine before a game they win. Now that routine becomes essential. The outcomes were probably unrelated to these actions. But automatic connection happens anyway. Random reward creates the strongest connections. Psychologists demonstrated this with pigeons. Birds received random food rewards at intervals. Pigeons began repeating whatever they happened to be doing when food appeared. One spun in, circles. Another pecked at a specific spot. The birds invented superstitions. Actions didn't cause the food, but timing made it seem like they did. The same thing happens to people. Superstitions feel real because they sometimes get reinforced. Your lucky shirt doesn't help pass every exam. But when it coincides with success, belief gets reinforced. When you fail, it gets explained away. Automatic thinking is very good at finding patterns. Too good. Patterns get found that don't exist, and behaviors get built around them. Randomness provides plenty of coincidental reinforcement. Fact 48. Gambler's fallacy expects independent probabilities. To balance out, belief exists that random events will even out in the short term. They don't. This is the gambler's fallacy. A coin lands on heads 5 times in a row. Tails seems due next. The coin doesn't know what happened before. Every flip is still 50-50. A roulette wheel hits black repeatedly. Gamblers pile money on red, thinking it has to come up soon. Each spin is independent. Past results don't change future probabilities. Automatic thinking expects small samples to look like large samples. Over 1 million coin flips, close to half heads and half tails results. But over 10 flips, anything can happen. The fallacy loses people enormous amounts of money. Betting continues because belief exists that probability will correct itself. They're chasing balance that doesn't exist in small samples. This happens outside gambling too. Waiting for a bus that hasn't come creates thinking that it must arrive soon because it's taking so long. But if buses come randomly, previous wait time doesn't predict future arrival. Random doesn't mean evenly distributed. Random means unpredictable. Streaks and clusters are normal in randomness. Automatic thinking just struggles to accept that. Fact 49. Hot hand fallacy. Sees meaningful streaks in randomness. When someone succeeds repeatedly, belief develops that they're hot and will continue succeeding. This is the hot hand fallacy, and it's usually wrong. A basketball player makes several shots in a row, teammates pass to them more, believing they have a hot hand. Statistically, their next shot isn't more likely to go in. Streaks happen in random sequences. They're normal, but automatic thinking interprets them as meaningful patterns. Skill or momentum gets seen where there's just normal variation. Studies of thousands of basketball shots found no evidence of hot hands. Players who just made shots weren't more likely to make the next one. The feeling of being hot didn't improve performance. This is the opposite of the gambler's fallacy. There, balance gets expected after a streak. Here, the streak seems likely to continue. Both errors come from the same place: misunderstanding randomness. Automatic thinking desperately wants to find predictability. Streaks feel meaningful. They suggest prediction is possible for what comes next. But in truly random sequences, you can't. Even experts fall for this. Professional analysts talk about players and teams being hot or cold. They're mostly describing random variation as if it were a real phenomenon. Fact 50. The Google effect reduces memory for easily searched information. When information is known to be easily available online, it doesn't get remembered as well. This is the Google effect. Automatic systems decide what's worth storing based on accessibility. If something can be looked up instantly, remembering it doesn't get prioritized. Studies show people remember where to find information better than the information itself. You remember which website had the answer, not the actual answer. This isn't necessarily bad. Remembering where to find information is useful, but it changes what memory prioritizes. Before search engines, facts had to be remembered. Now storage gets outsourced. Automatic systems adapt by focusing on navigation rather than retention. The effect changes how learning happens. Instead of memorizing information, search strategies get memorized. Memory becomes more about access than storage. This represents a fundamental shift in how memory functions. The system is adapting to an environment where external storage is reliable and instant. Internal storage priorities are changing accordingly. Fact 51. Transactive memory distributes knowledge. Across relationship partners. In close relationships, not everything gets remembered individually. Memory responsibilities get divided with partners. This shared memory system is called transactive memory. One person remembers directions, the other remembers appointments. Specialization happens in different memory domains and reliance on each other develops. Couples develop these systems naturally. Encoding stops for information the partner reliably handles. Trust develops in their memory for certain categories and resources get freed up. This creates efficiency but also vulnerability. If the relationship ends, access to half the shared memory system is lost. Information relied on them to remember is simply gone. Groups develop transactive memory too. Work teams divide expertise. Each member becomes the go-to person for specific knowledge domains. Memory isn't entirely individual. It's partly distributed across social networks. Less gets remembered individually because participation in a larger memory system exists. The system works well when the network is stable, but it creates blind spots when accessing that network isn't possible. Fact 52. Your sense of self is constructed narrative, not fixed reality. A story exists about who you are. Automatic systems construct this story continuously, editing it as you go. Sense of consistent identity across time comes from how past and present get connected. This narrative helps you function, but it's more interpretation than pure fact. The story isn't completely accurate. Selective emphasis happens on events fitting current self-understanding. Contradictions get smoothed out to create continuity. Different situations bring out different behaviors. You act differently at work than at home, with friends versus strangers. Responses vary, but the self-story emphasizes consistency. This narrative serves important purposes. Having a coherent sense of self makes decision-making easier and gives life meaning. The story is real in its effects, even if selective in construction. Continuous shaping of autobiography happens. Each memory recall potentially adjusts details to better align with how you currently see yourself. The narrative evolves as you do. Fact 53. Rosy retrospection makes past events. seem better than actual looking back. Experiences seem better than they did while happening. This is rosy retrospection. A vacation with problems seems wonderful a year later. Highlights get remembered and frustrations get forgotten. Difficulties fade while positive moments remain vivid. Memories get filtered over time. Negative emotions lose intensity faster than positive ones. What remains is a pleasantly distorted version of reality. This isn't conscious lying. The filtered version feels like accurate memory. Genuine belief exists that the past was better than it actually was. The effect makes you nostalgic. The good old days seem better because memories have been polished. Present experiences can't compete with idealized memories. Rosy retrospection has benefits. Feeling good about your life story gets helped by it. But it also creates unrealistic expectations. Chasing recreated experiences happens that never existed as remembered. The past becomes progressively more pleasant in memory. This serves psychological needs but creates distorted understanding of personal history. Fact 54. Negativity bias weighs. Bad experiences, heavier than good. Bad events affect you more strongly than equally good events. This is negativity bias. One criticism hurts more than one compliment helps. A single negative interaction with someone colors entire impressions. Positive interactions need to outnumber negative ones just to balance out. Evolution prioritized threats. Noticing positive things was less urgent than noticing dangers. This ancient priority system still runs modern reactions. Research shows about 5 positive interactions are needed to counteract 1 negative interaction in relationships. The ratio isn't 1-to-1. Negative weighs heavier. News media exploits this. Negative stories capture attention better than positive ones. Automatic systems are designed to focus on what's wrong, not what's right. The bias affects memory too. Insults get remembered better than compliments. Failures stick more than successes. The default is to hold on to bad and let go of good. This served survival needs. Missing a threat was more dangerous than missing an opportunity. Modern life doesn't have those stakes, but the bias remains. Fact 55. Pecan rule. Judges experiences by intense and final moments. Experiences get judged based on their most intense moment and their ending. The rest barely matters. This is the pecan rule. 2 patients have colonoscopies. One lasts 8 minutes with severe pain. Another lasts 24 minutes with the same severe pain, then several minutes of mild discomfort before ending. The longer procedure is objectively worse, more total pain, but patients rate it as better because it ended less painfully. The ending dominated overall judgment. The same works with positive experiences. A vacation's best moment and final day determine whether it gets called a great trip. Middle days fade in importance. This means duration doesn't matter as much as expected. A short terrible experience with a bad ending feels worse than a longer terrible experience with a less bad ending. Experiences get summarized using shortcuts. Peak and end are the shortcut. Everything else compresses or disappears. Knowing this, you can optimize experiences. Focus on creating good peaks and good endings. Duration matters less than these key moments. Fact 56. Duration neglect ignores. How long? Experiences actually lasted. When remembering experiences, how long they lasted barely gets considered. This is duration neglect. 2 people experience the same level of pain, one for 5 minutes, one for 20 minutes. Later, they rate the experiences as equally bad. Duration made little difference to memory. Experiences get judged by intensity and how they ended, not by length. A short, intense experience feels equivalent to a long, intense experience in memory. This creates strange preferences. People often choose shorter, intense experiences over longer, less intense ones, even when total displeasure is greater in the short option. Vacations show this too. A 3-day trip with one amazing day feels as good in memory as a 7-day trip with the same amazing day. Extra days add little to remembered enjoyment. Duration neglect means experiences lasting longer isn't actually wanted. Good peaks and good endings are wanted. Length contributes surprisingly little to remembered satisfaction. This challenges intuitions about what makes experiences valuable. Time spent matters less than moments experienced. Fact 57. The Bader-Meinhof phenomenon makes new learning feel like synchronicity. After learning something new, you suddenly notice it everywhere. This is the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, also called frequency illusion. You learn a new word and suddenly hear it in multiple conversations. You discover a new band and their music starts appearing on every playlist. You learn about a concept and articles about it seem to multiply. Nothing actually changed in the world. The frequency didn't increase. Your attention changed. Once something enters awareness, you notice it where it was already present but previously filtered out. This creates a feeling of meaningful coincidence. Learning about something and then encountering it repeatedly feels like synchronicity. It seems significant, but it's just selective. Attention. Before learning the thing, your attention filtered it out as irrelevant. After learning it, your attention flags it as relevant. Encounters were always there, just unnoticed. The phenomenon can make new learning feel validated. Everything seems connected to what you just learned. This feels significant, but it's an artifact of attention, not evidence of cosmic connection. Awareness creates the pattern, not reality changing around you. Fact 58. Priming influences behavior through unconscious exposure to cues. Seeing or hearing something subtly changes behavior afterward. This is priming, and you never notice it happening. People shown words related to elderly people walk more slowly afterward. They weren't told to walk slowly. The words unconsciously influence behavior. Subjects exposed to money-related images become less helpful. They sit farther from others and work alone more. The exposure changed behavior without awareness. Restaurant workers who carry credit card trays receive bigger tips. Customers don't consciously think about money, but seeing the credit card logo primes thoughts of spending. Even smells work. Cleaning product scents make people clean up more. They don't notice the smell consciously, but it activates cleaning-related concepts. Effects are temporary and subtle. Priming doesn't make you do things you oppose. It just nudges behavior slightly in certain directions. Environment constantly primes you. Everything seen and heard activates related concepts. Those activated concepts influence next thoughts and actions. You think you're acting freely, but subtle guidance comes from recent exposures. Fact 59. Semantic priming speeds. Recognition of conceptually related words. Networks of related concepts get activated together. This is semantic priming, and it happens in milliseconds. Seeing the word doctor automatically activates related words like nurse, hospital, and medicine. If nurse appears next, recognition happens faster than for an unrelated word. This happens too quickly for conscious thought. Likely upcoming concepts get pre-activated. Related words are temporarily easier to process. The effect shows how information organization works. Concepts aren't stored individually. They're connected in networks based on meaning, frequency of co-occurrence, and personal experience. Reading bread activates butter before teacher, even though both are valid words. Automatic systems know which concepts typically appear together. This helps with understanding language quickly. When someone says the patient saw the doctor, medical concepts have already been activated. Sentence processing happens faster than if unrelated topics were mixed, but it also creates blind spots. Errors might get missed if the wrong word is semantically related. The prediction system sometimes overrides what's actually written. Fact 60. Mere exposure effect builds preference through repeated familiarity. The more exposure to something happens, the more tendency exists to like it. This is the mere exposure effect, working without notice. Songs disliked on first hearing often become favorites after repeated exposure. The music didn't change, familiarity with it did. Companies advertise repeatedly for this reason. Even if ads get ignored, exposure makes the brand feel familiar. Familiar feels safer and more likable than unfamiliar. This works with faces too. People prefer photos of themselves that show them as others see them. But you prefer photos showing you as you see yourself in mirrors. Each person likes what they've been exposed to most. The effect has limits. If something is strongly disliked initially, exposure can make it worse. But for neutral or mildly positive things, familiarity breeds liking. Attention doesn't need to be paid for this to work. Unconscious exposure is enough. Things seen peripherally feel more positive than completely new things. Familiarity gets interpreted as safety. Things encountered before haven't hurt you. So repeated exposure makes things feel comfortable and preferable. Preference feels natural, but it's manufactured through repetition. Fact 61. illusory truth effect turns repeated lies into believed facts. Hearing something enough times makes you start believing it's true. This is the illusory truth effect, working even when you know better. Repeated statements feel more true than new ones. Familiarity gets mistaken for accuracy. Something heard before feels right, regardless of whether it actually is. This happens even with obvious falsehoods. Researchers told people false facts repeatedly. Later, people rated those false facts as more likely to be true than facts heard only once. The effect works even when something is initially told to be false. After enough repetitions, the warning fades, but familiarity remains. The repeated lie starts feeling true. This is why propaganda and misinformation campaigns repeat claims constantly. Repetition creates the feeling of truth. Belief begins in things simply because they've been encountered multiple times. Full protection isn't possible by knowing about this effect. Familiarity influences judgment unconsciously. Even with skepticism, repeated exposure makes false information feel more credible. Mental shortcuts get used. Familiar information processes more smoothly. Smooth processing feels good. That good feeling gets interpreted as truth. Reality doesn't matter as much as repetition. Fact 62. Sleeper effect makes persuasive messages strengthen over time. Sometimes initial rejection of a message happens because of its source. Later the source gets forgotten, but the message gets remembered. Now it persuades. This is the sleeper effect. You read an article from an unreliable website. Dismissal happens because of source distrust. Weeks later, the information gets remembered, but the source is forgotten. Without the negative source attached, the message becomes more persuasive. Content separated from its questionable origin now influences thinking. This happens with advertising too. A commercial is known to be manipulative. Initial resistance happens. But later, product claims get remembered without the advertising context. Claims feel more credible. The effect shows how memory distorts over time. Source information fades faster than content. Free-floating facts end up in mind, disconnected from origins. This makes you vulnerable to misinformation. Even when bad sources get correctly identified in the moment, those judgments don't stick. False information remains and gains influence once source is forgotten. Context doesn't get preserved well in memory. Information becomes detached from where it was learned. Messages initially rejected can persuade later through this separation process. Fact 63. Curse of knowledge prevents experts from explaining simply. Once something is known, remembering what it was like not to know it becomes impossible. This is the curse of knowledge, making experts terrible teachers. Experts forget which parts confused them as beginners. Steps that seem obvious now get skipped, but weren't obvious when learning. Jargon gets used without realizing it's not universally understood. This happens when explaining something you're good at. Foundational concepts feel so basic that mentioning them doesn't happen. But beginners need exactly those foundations. The curse affects writing, teaching, and communication. Experts assume too much background knowledge. Explanations get pitched at the wrong level because accessing the beginner mindset isn't possible anymore. This creates frustration on both sides. The expert thinks clarity is happening. The learner feels stupid for not understanding. Neither realizes the curse is the real problem. Parents experience this with children. Adults forget how little kids know. Expectations exist for understanding of concepts that require years of development. Knowledge changes how information gets perceived. What's simple now was once complex. But reliable recreation of that earlier state of not knowing isn't possible. Expertise blinds you to the beginner experience. Fact 64. Functional fixedness limits. Object use to standard functions. Struggling to see objects as anything other than their typical use happens. This is functional fixedness blocking creative problem solving. You need to hang something but have no nails. A shoe could work as a hammer, but you don't think of it because shoes are for wearing, not hammering. Classic studies demonstrate this with candles and boxes. People need to mount a candle on a wall. They're given a candle, matches, and a box of tacks. Most can't solve it. The solution is emptying the box, tacking it to the wall as a platform, then putting the candle on the box. But people only see the box as a container, not as a potential platform. This fixedness limits innovation. The most creative solutions often involve using things in non-standard ways, but automatic. Thinking resists seeing those possibilities. Children have less functional fixedness than adults. They readily use objects in imaginative ways because rigid categories haven't been learned yet. Experience teaches what things are for, and this knowledge constrains creativity. Automatic categorization happens for objects by their primary function. This is efficient for routine tasks but blocks seeing alternative uses when needed. Fact 65. The Zeigarnik effect makes incomplete tasks haunt memory. More unfinished tasks stick in mind more than completed ones. This is the Zeigarnik effect. When something starts and doesn't finish, it gets kept active. It nags. Completed tasks get cleared from mental space. A waiter remembers orders perfectly until delivery. After delivery, memory vanishes. The open task stays accessible. The closed task gets deleted. This explains why cliffhangers work. Stories stopped mid-action occupy thoughts. The system wants closure and keeps the incomplete story active. It's also why to-do lists help. Writing down tasks gives permission to stop actively holding them. The mental loop can release because the task is captured externally. Starting something creates psychological tension. Only completion releases it. Until then, the incomplete task takes up resources whether wanted or not. This can be used strategically. Starting a task even briefly makes it more likely you'll return to finish it. The incomplete state creates internal pressure for completion. Fact 66. Von Restorff effect highlights distinctive items. In memory, things that stand out get remembered better. This is the von Restorff effect, also called the isolation effect. Show someone a list of words in black ink with one word in red. Later, they'll remember the red word much better than others. The distinctive item doesn't need to be visually different. It can stand out through meaning, emotion, or any other dimension. Whatever differs from the pattern gets encoded more strongly. Advertisers use this constantly. Making products visually distinctive helps people remember them among competitors. Unusual packaging isn't accidental. Teachers can use this too. Making key information stand out helps students remember it. Distinctiveness acts as a memory hook. Automatic noticing happens for deviations from patterns. Those deviations get extra processing resources. This makes them more memorable than items that blend into the background. If you want something remembered, make it different. The difference creates memory advantage regardless of what dimension the difference exists on. Fact 67. Egocentric bias. Overestimates personal contributions to group projects. You think you contributed more to group efforts than you actually did. This is egocentric bias causing constant conflict. In one study, researchers asked married couples to estimate what percentage of household chores each person did. The combined percentages added up to far more than 100%. Each person overestimated their own contribution. Neither was lying. Both genuinely believed they did more than they actually did. This happens because perfect memory exists of your own efforts. Every time you took out trash or stayed late at work gets remembered. But you don't notice every time your partner or coworker did the same thing. Your contributions are vivid in memory. Others' contributions are background noise unless specific attention gets paid. This creates resentment in teams. Everyone feels underappreciated because everyone thinks they're doing more than their share. Often everyone's contributing fairly, but egocentric memory distorts perception. You're not deliberately taking credit. Experiences get weighted more heavily because you lived them directly. Others' efforts reach you second-hand or not at all. Fact 68. False consensus effect. Assumes most people share your views. You think opinions and behaviors are more common than they actually are. This is the false consensus effect. If you like a particular TV show, assumption happens that most people like it. If you vote a certain way, belief exists that that's the majority position. Your preferences feel normal and widespread. Studies ask people to estimate how many others share their opinion on various topics. People consistently overestimate agreement with their own views and underestimate agreement with opposing views. This happens because you surround yourself with similar people. Friends probably share many of your views. Media consumption confirms beliefs. This creates an echo chamber. People you interact with regularly aren't a representative sample. But automatic thinking treats them as typical. Generalization happens from your immediate circle to the entire population. The effect makes you less tolerant of different views. If most people seem to agree with you, Anyone who disagrees seems weird or unreasonable. Failure happens to recognize that your position might be the minority. Yourself gets used as the model for normal. Your thoughts and behaviors feel like the default setting. Deviations from your patterns seem unusual, when actually everyone thinks their own patterns are normal. Fact 69. Naive realism treats your subjective perception. As objective belief exists that you see reality as it truly is. Everyone else is biased, but you're objective. This is naive realism, and everyone thinks this about themselves. Your perception feels like reality. Other people who see things differently must be misinformed, irrational, or biased. The possibility that your own perception is subjective feels wrong. This creates impossible disagreements. Both sides believe they're seeing objective truth. Neither can understand how the other doesn't see it. Both think the other is being deliberately blind. Perceptions feel direct and unfiltered. Experience doesn't include interpretations and assumptions, just what seems like reality. So assumption happens that that's what reality is. But perception is always interpretation. Construction happens of what you experience. Different systems construct differently. Everyone's reality is subjective, but it feels objective from inside. This bias is especially strong with values and politics. Political views seem based on facts and logic. People who disagree seem emotional or brainwashed. They think exactly the same about you. Escape from your own perspective isn't possible. Everything passes through your subjective lens. Naive realism is believing you don't have a lens at all. Fact 70. Bias blind spot makes you see others' biases. Never your own spotting bias in other people is easy. Spotting it in yourself is nearly impossible. This is the bias blind spot. When others make judgments, their cognitive biases are visible clearly. They're influenced by emotions, self-interest, and flawed thinking. When you make judgments, you feel objective and rational. Studies show this consistently. People rate themselves as less biased than average. Mathematically impossible if everyone's doing it, but everyone does. Even when taught about specific biases, belief exists that others fall for them more. Learning about bias doesn't reduce your blind spot, it might even make it worse. Past biases can sometimes be seen. Looking back, recognition happens that you were wrong, but in the present moment, you feel clear-headed and unbiased. This happens because bias works unconsciously. Experience of being influenced doesn't happen, just experience of conclusions, which feel like they came from pure logic. The blind spot makes self-improvement difficult. Fixing biases you don't think you have is impossible. Insistence continues on being objective while continuing to make biased judgments. Confidence in your own objectivity is itself a bias. People who think they're least biased are often the most biased of all. Fact 71. Introspection. Illusion creates unjustified trust in self-knowledge. Belief exists that you understand your own thoughts and motivations. You probably don't. This is the introspection illusion. When asked why you made a decision, confident explanations get given. But research shows these explanations are often wrong. Guessing happens at your own motivations. In studies, people's stated reasons for choices don't match actual factors that influence them, but they believe their explanations completely. Belief exists in special access to your own mind. It feels like looking directly at thoughts and feelings, but actually interpretation of signals happens just like interpreting other people's behavior. Much processing happens unconsciously. The conscious mind only sees results. Then stories get created to explain those results. These stories feel true because they come from inside, but they're often just plausible-sounding guesses. Explanation of your own behavior to you happens, not reporting of known facts. Therapists and self-help advice often assume introspection reveals truth, but looking inward doesn't guarantee accuracy. Deep examination of thoughts can happen while still completely misunderstanding why you do what you do. Confidence in self-knowledge exceeds actual self-knowledge. The introspection illusion makes you trust flawed self-understanding. Fact 72. Confabulation generates convincing but completely false behavioral explanations. Invented explanations for behavior get presented as memories. This is confabulation, or memory invention, and it happens to everyone. In experiments, researchers influence people's choices through subtle cues. When asked why they chose something, logical reasons get given, but those reasons are made up. The real influence was the hidden cue. The invented explanations sound convincing, they make sense. but they're fiction. Filling in of a plausible story happens after the fact. This isn't lying. Genuine belief exists in the explanations. The conscious mind didn't witness the actual decision process, so narrative creation happens that seems reasonable. Split-brain patients show this dramatically. Their left hemisphere invents explanations for actions controlled by their right hemisphere. The explanations are completely wrong, but delivered with total confidence. Confabulation happens constantly in daily life. Someone asks why you ordered that dish. Reasons get given. Those reasons feel true. But the actual causes might have been completely different. Gaps in knowledge get hated, especially about yourself. So gaps get filled with invented explanations. These confabulations become part of remembered experience. Telling them apart from actual reasons becomes impossible. Fact 73. Choice blindness prevents noticing. When your preferences get switched. Noticing doesn't happen when choices get switched right in front of you. This is choice blindness, and it's deeply unsettling. Researchers asked people to choose which of two faces they found more attractive. After choosing, the researcher used sleight of hand to show them the face they didn't pick. Most people didn't notice the switch. They looked at the wrong face and explained why they chose it. Reasons got created for preferring a face they had actually rejected. This works with more meaningful choices too. People choose between options, then receive the option they didn't choose. They accept it and justify it as their original preference. Belief exists that you know your own preferences. Choice blindness shows tracking doesn't happen as carefully as believed. Confidence in what you want exceeds actual awareness. The effect reveals how much confabulation happens about preferences. Stored preferences don't get accessed and explained. You look at what you're holding and generate reasons why you must have chosen it. Sense of consistent preference is partly illusion. You're more flexible and uncertain than realized. When reality shifts, memory adjusts to match without noticing the adjustment. Fact 74. Change blindness. Misses large visual alterations between scenes. Huge changes happen in your visual field and you completely miss them. This is change blindness. Researchers show people photos, then show the same photos with major elements changed. A building disappears. A person's clothing changes color. Objects move to different locations. People often don't notice these changes even when looking directly at them. The changes aren't subtle. They're obvious once pointed out. But initially they're invisible. This happens because complete visual scenes don't get stored. What gets noticed is what gets attended to. Everything else exists in peripheral awareness but isn't encoded in detail. When the scene changes during a brief interruption, rebuilding happens from memory and current input. Careful comparison doesn't happen between old and new versions, just construction of a coherent view. Real-world examples are striking. Someone asks for directions. While talking, workers carrying a door walk between you. During that interruption, the person asking for directions is replaced with someone completely different. Most people don't notice. Feeling exists like you see everything. Change blindness proves you don't. Visual experience is much more limited than it seems. Fact 75. Inattentional blindness. Makes obvious, unexpected stimuli completely invisible. When focused on one task, complete failure can happen to see things right in front of you. This is inattentional blindness. The most famous demonstration involves a video of people passing basketballs. Viewers count passes by one team. In the middle of the video, someone in a gorilla suit walks through the scene. About half of viewers don't see the gorilla. Not because it's hidden, it's in the center of the frame for several seconds, but they're counting passes so the gorilla becomes invisible. This happens because attention is limited. When focus happens on something, other things don't get processed fully. They hit the eyes but don't reach awareness. The effect works in real life too. Radiologists sometimes miss visible tumors on scans when looking for something else. Drivers miss motorcycles when focused on cars. Assumption happens that anything unusual would get noticed. It wouldn't. Attention creates conscious reality. Things outside attention don't exist in experience, even when physically present. This isn't about eyesight. Eyes receive the information. Processing into conscious awareness just doesn't happen. The world you experience is smaller than the world hitting your senses. Fact 76. Attentional blink causes brief, temporary blindness after targets. After spotting something you're looking for, brief blindness happens to the next thing. This is the attentional blink. In experiments, letters flash quickly on a screen. Instructions are to spot 2 target letters among random letters. Most people see the first target. Many completely miss the second one if it appears within half a second. The second letter isn't harder to see. Temporary offline status happens. Identifying the first target consumes resources. For a brief moment, processing new visual information can't happen. This happens in everyday situations. Scanning a document for key information happens. You find one piece and miss the next one even though you looked right at it. The blink lasts only a fraction of a second, but during that time, information vanishes from perception. Brief inability exists to flag new important items. This reveals how limited attention really is. Continuous processing of visual information can't happen. Gaps exist. Things fall through those gaps and disappear from experience. Vision gets experienced as continuous. Attentional blink shows it's actually broken into discrete moments with blind periods between them. These gaps get hidden from you. Fact 77. Weapon focus effect narrows attention dangerously during stress. During threatening situations, attention locks onto the threat and ignores everything else. This is weapon focus effect. Eyewitnesses to crimes involving weapons focus intensely on the weapon. They can describe the gun in detail, but they often can't describe the criminal's face or clothing. The threat captures attention so completely that everything else gets minimal processing. This is terrible for memory formation. The weapon gets recorded but not the context. This happens because threat detection is the priority. When danger appears, resources shift to tracking that danger. Everything else becomes less important. The effect reduces performance during emergencies. Fixation happens on the immediate threat and escape routes or important details about the situation get missed. Police and military train specifically to overcome this. Natural attention under stress is too narrow. Practice happens in spreading attention wider despite the threat. Stress response creates tunnel vision. What's in the tunnel gets perfect attention. Everything outside the tunnel barely registers. This kept ancestors alive by focusing on predators. In modern emergencies, it can prevent seeing critical information outside the tunnel. Fact 78. Cocktail party effect filters background conversations while monitoring names. In a noisy room, focus can happen on one conversation and ignoring others. But your name still gets heard across the room. This is the cocktail party effect. Audio gets filtered constantly. Most sounds get suppressed. The conversation being attended to gets enhanced. But certain triggers break through the filter automatically. Your name is the strongest trigger. Even in unattended conversations, your name reaches awareness. Unattended channels get monitored for personally relevant information. This shows attention isn't all or nothing. Complete ignoring of background noise doesn't happen. Filtering happens through a system looking for importance markers. The effect works because language processing happens at multiple levels. Surface features get analyzed even in unattended channels. Most don't reach awareness, but significant words break through. Belief exists that only the person you're talking to gets heard. Actually, processing happens of multiple conversations shallowly, and one conversation deeply. The shallow processing is invisible until something important appears. This filtering is essential for functioning in noisy environments, but it's imperfect. Things get missed in both attended and unattended channels. Experience of what got heard differs from what actually happened around you. Fact 79. Divided attention significantly degrades performance on all tasks. When trying to do 2 things at once, both suffer. This is divided attention, and the costs are higher than realized. Belief exists in doing both tasks simultaneously. Actually, rapid switching happens between them. Each switch takes time and creates errors. Research shows divided attention reduces performance on both tasks by 20 to 40%. That's not a small drop. Functioning at half capacity happens on both things. Even simple tasks suffer. Talking on a phone while driving, even hands-free, increases accident risk substantially. Full coverage can't happen for both activities. The degradation isn't obvious. Feeling exists like handling both tasks fine. But objective measurements show clear performance drops. Some task combinations work better than others. If one task is fully automatic, division costs less. But most tasks require attention, and true splitting can't happen. People who think they're good at multitasking usually aren't. Studies find people who multitask frequently are often worse at it than people who rarely do it. Attention is a limited resource. Dividing it means giving less to each task. No way exists around this fundamental limit, despite how capable you feel. Fact 80. Task switching. Costs make multitasking less efficient than sequential. Every time switching happens between tasks, time and accuracy get lost. These are task switching costs, making multitasking inefficient. Switching tasks takes longer than continuing one task. Time gets needed to disengage from the first task and engage with the second. This happens every single switch. The costs include time and errors. More mistakes get made when switching frequently. More time gets lost than just the switch duration because context needs rebuilding. When returning to a task after switching away, remembering needs to happen about where you were and what you were doing. This takes mental effort each time. Studies show people complete tasks faster by doing them sequentially than by switching between them. But most people believe they're faster when multitasking. Subjective experience is wrong. The feeling of productivity from multitasking is an illusion. Feeling busy and engaged happens, but actually working slower and producing lower quality results is happening. For simple routine tasks, switching costs are small. For complex tasks requiring concentration, the costs are massive. Every interruption can cost several minutes of productivity. Doing one thing at a time isn't just more efficient, it's dramatically more efficient. Better functioning happens with sustained focus than with constant switching. Fact 81. The contrast effect makes sequential comparisons distort judgment. The same thing seems different depending on what you experienced right before it. This is the contrast effect. After holding your hand in ice water, room temperature water feels hot. After holding it in hot water, room temperature water feels cold. The water temperature didn't change. Your perception did. This happens with all kinds of judgments. Meeting someone average-looking after meeting someone very attractive makes them seem less attractive. Meeting them after meeting someone unattractive makes them seem more attractive. Job candidates get judged relative to previous candidates. Following a terrible candidate makes an average candidate seem excellent. Following an excellent candidate makes an average candidate seem terrible. The effect distorts pricing perception too. A $100 item seems expensive in a discount store. The same item seems cheap in a luxury store. Context changes perceived value. Fair judgment would evaluate things independently, but automatic systems judge through comparison. What came immediately before strongly influences current evaluation. This makes order matter enormously. The sequence of experiences shapes judgment more than the actual qualities of what's being judged. Context overwhelms content. Fact 82. The pratfall effect makes perfect people seem less likable. Highly competent people become more likable when they make small mistakes. This is the pratfall effect. Someone appears perfect in every way. Then they spill coffee or mispronounce a word. Their likability actually increases. The minor flaw makes them seem more human and relatable. This only works for people already seen as competent. If someone seems incompetent, mistakes make them even less appealing. The effect depends on baseline perception. Studies showed participants videos of people answering quiz questions. Some subjects spilled coffee during the video. Highly successful quiz takers became more likable after spilling. Poorly performing quiz takers became less likable. The effect happens because perfection creates distance. Struggling to relate to someone who seems flawless happens. A small humanizing mistake closes that gap. Politicians sometimes use this deliberately. A calculated minor flaw makes them seem more authentic. The key is that the flaw must be small and the competence well established. Perfect is intimidating. Slightly flawed perfection is relatable. Automatic social judgment responds more positively to the latter. Fact 83. The Ben Franklin effect makes favors increase liking. If someone does you a favor, they end up liking you more. This seems backwards, but it's real. This is the Ben Franklin effect. Expectation would be that doing favors for someone makes you like them more. Actually, having someone do a favor for you makes them like you more. This happens because of cognitive dissonance. After doing you a favor, questioning happens about why they did it. The answer, I must like this person. Otherwise, why would I help them? Action came first, then justification got created. That justification was liking, and that feeling becomes real. Ben Franklin reportedly used this. He wanted to win over a rival. Instead of doing the rival a favour, Franklin asked the rival to lend him a rare book. The rival did, and became friendlier afterward. This works because behaviour shapes beliefs. Assumption happens that actions reflect feelings. If helpful action happened toward you, positive feelings must exist about you. Want someone to like you? Don't just help them. Ask them to help you. Their assistance will change how they feel about you. Fact. 84. The Dunning-Kruger peak creates maximum confidence. At minimum knowledge. There's a specific point where confidence peaks despite minimal knowledge. This is the Dunning-Kruger peak. When first learning something, confidence rises quickly. A little knowledge creates feeling of understanding. This is the peak moment where confidence is highest relative to actual competence. After the peak, reality sets in. As learning continues, discovery happens about how much remains unknown. Confidence drops despite increasing competence. This is the valley of despair. Eventually, with true expertise, confidence rises again. But it never reaches that initial peak level. Experts know too much about complexity to be that confident. The peak is dangerous. Maximum confidence with minimum competence creates terrible decisions. People at the peak don't know they're at the peak. They feel genuinely knowledgeable. This explains why beginners often argue most aggressively. They haven't learned enough to understand what they don't understand. Their confidence feels justified from inside. Recognition of the peak can help. When feeling very confident about new knowledge, that's a warning sign. You're probably at the peak, and humility would serve you better. Fact 85. The cashier effect makes familiar tasks feel faster. Time seems to pass faster when you're doing familiar tasks. This is the cashier effect. Cashiers report their shifts feeling shorter than they actually are. The repetitive familiar work makes time compress. For customers waiting in line, time drags. The unfamiliar waiting makes time expand. This happens because familiar tasks require less attention. Your mind wanders. Time passes unnoticed. Unfamiliar tasks demand full attention. Every moment gets noticed, so time feels longer. The effect explains why childhood feels longer than adulthood. In childhood, most experiences are novel, each gets encoded distinctly. In adulthood, days blend together in familiar routines. Time compresses. Vacations feel longer than normal weeks because they contain novel experiences. Each new experience gets encoded separately. Normal weeks contain familiar routines that blur together. If you want time to feel longer, seek novelty. New experiences slow perceived time. Routine accelerates it. The effect is about memory encoding, not actual time experience. Looking back, periods with more distinct memories feel longer. Periods that blurred together feel shorter. Fact 86. Reactance makes forbidden options suddenly more attractive. When something becomes forbidden or restricted, wanting it increases. This is reactance. Telling someone they can't have something makes that thing more desirable. The restriction itself creates attraction. Children demonstrate this clearly. Forbidding a toy makes it the most desired toy. The prohibition makes it special. Adults do this too. Banned books sell more copies. Age-restricted content seems more appealing. The restriction signals value. Reactance happens because losing freedom gets hated. When options get taken away, pushing back happens by wanting them more. It's not about the option itself. It's about defending autonomy. Marketers use this. Limited time offer or exclusive access trigger reactance. Artificial scarcity makes wanting things happen that weren't wanted before. Rebellion happens against restrictions. This rebellion makes forbidden things seem better than they are. Response isn't to actual value. Response is to the threat to freedom of choice. Understanding reactance can help resist manipulation. When sudden desire happens for something restricted, question whether the thing itself is appealing or just the restriction. Fact 87. The contrast principle makes extreme anchors move middle ground. When an extreme option exists, moderate options seem more reasonable. This is the contrast principle in negotiation and decision-making. A negotiator starts with an extreme demand. The other side rejects it. Then a more moderate demand comes. That moderate demand now seems reasonable by contrast, even though it's still favourable to the negotiator. Car dealers show you the most expensive model first. Then the mid-range model seems affordable by comparison. Without seeing the expensive model first, the mid-range would seem costly. This works in reverse too. Starting with a very low offer makes a slightly higher offer seem generous, even when it's still unfairly low. The contrast creates shifted perception of what's reasonable. The extreme anchor moves the entire scale. What would normally seem unreasonable now seems moderate. Understanding this principle helps in negotiations. Recognize when extreme positions are being used to shift your sense of what's acceptable. Evaluate positions independently, not through contrast. The first position presented has enormous power. It sets the frame for everything that follows. That's why starting positions matter so much in any negotiation. Fact 88. The effort heuristic assumes difficult equals valuable. When something requires significant effort, automatic assumption happens that it must be valuable. This is the effort heuristic. Spending hours on a project makes it seem more valuable than spending minutes, regardless of actual quality. The time investment gets confused with worth. Poetry that's difficult to understand seems more profound than clear poetry. The effort to understand gets interpreted as depth, even when the difficulty comes from poor writing. Expensive ingredients that are hard to source make a dish seem better, even when simpler ingredients would taste identical. The effort signals quality. This explains why fraternities use difficult initiations. The suffering makes membership feel valuable. If joining was easy, value would seem less. Companies charge more for products requiring visible effort to produce, even when effort doesn't improve quality. Customers pay more because effort signals value. The heuristic is a shortcut. Effort often does correlate with value, but the correlation isn't perfect. Sometimes effort is wasted, sometimes easy is better. But automatic thinking treats effort as a reliable signal of worth. Understanding this can help resist overpaying for effort that doesn't add value. Evaluate outcomes, not process. Fact 89. Temporal discounting, overvalues, immediate rewards, over future ones. Preference exists for small rewards, now over larger rewards later. This is temporal discounting, driving poor long-term decisions. Would you rather have $10 today or $15 next week? Most people choose today. The time delay makes the larger amount feel less valuable. This isn't rational. Waiting 1 week for 50% more money is obviously better, but automatic systems heavily discount future value. The effect gets stronger with longer delays. A reward 1 year away seems almost worthless compared to a reward today, even when the future reward is much larger. This explains why saving money doesn't happen, eating unhealthily happens, and avoiding exercise happens. Immediate pleasure outweighs delayed benefit. Discounting makes future you seem like a stranger not worth helping. Intellectual knowledge exists that future rewards matter, but emotional systems don't care. Rewards now get wanted. The future feels abstract and unreal. Present temptation always wins against future benefit in automatic calculations. Overcoming this requires systems, not willpower. Automatic deposits for savings, removing tempting foods from the house, making healthy choices the default. Change the environment because changing the discounting is nearly impossible. Fact 90. The normalcy bias. Underestimates likelihood of disaster. Occurring assumption happens that things will continue normally, even when warning signs appear. This is normalcy bias, and it can be deadly. When disasters begin, evacuation often doesn't happen. Underestimation of threat occurs. Insistence happens that things will return to normal. Before fires spread, assumption happens that they won't reach you. Before floods arrive, belief exists, it won't be that bad. The bias makes waiting too long to act. Optimization happened for stability. Disasters are rare, so assuming normalcy is usually correct. But when disaster actually comes, the bias keeps you frozen. People died in disasters because believing the situation was truly dangerous couldn't happen. Assumption kept happening that normalcy would return. By the time reality got accepted, escape was impossible. The bias isn't stupidity, it's the default setting. Radical changes feel impossible even when they're happening. Expectation keeps happening for normal to resume. This prevents appropriate responses to genuine emergencies. Training can help overcome this. Emergency responders practice treating warning signs seriously. For most people, the bias activates automatically and prevents life-saving action until too late. Fact 91. The picture superiority effect makes images more memorable than words. Images get remembered much better than words. This is the picture superiority effect. Tell someone information verbally, and they'll remember about 10% after 3 days. Show them the same information as an image, and they'll remember 65%. This happens because visual processing is older and more developed. Language is relatively recent in evolution. Visual memory is ancient and powerful. Images get processed and stored differently than words. They create more connections in memory. They're easier to recall and less prone to distortion. This is why infographics work better than text for conveying information. Why advertising relies heavily on images. Why textbooks include diagrams. Pictures create stronger memory traces. The effect is so strong that even imagining pictures while learning words improves memory. Visualization creates picture-like encoding, even without actual images. Understanding this can improve learning and communication. Convert important information into visual form when possible. The extra effort in creating visuals pays off enormously in retention and recall. For important information, don't just read it or hear it. See it, draw it, visualize it. The picture format creates memory advantage that words alone can't match. Fact 92. The focusing effect makes attention. Feel like reality, whatever gets your attention feels like the most important thing in the world. This is the focusing effect, also called the focusing illusion. When thinking about climate, it seems central to happiness. Studies show it barely affects life satisfaction. While focused on it, importance seems enormous. In actual daily life, it barely matters. The same happens with any factor. Salary seems essential when thinking about salary, but after a certain point, more money doesn't increase happiness much. Attention makes it seem crucial. Whatever has focus gets treated as the primary factor. When something is being considered, automatic systems treat it as what matters most. This affects decisions. Overweighting happens for factors currently considered. Underweighting happens for factors not being thought about. The most recently considered factor dominates choice. Politicians use this constantly. Your attention gets directed to specific issues. While focused there, those issues seem overwhelmingly important. Other equally important issues disappear from consideration. The effect is captured in the phrase, "Nothing is as important as it seems while you're thinking about it." Attention magnifies. Step back from focused attention to get more accurate perspective. Knowing this can help make better decisions. When something feels extremely important, ask whether it's actually important or just currently focal. Fact 93. Attribute substitution answers easy questions instead of hard. When faced with difficult questions, automatic answering happens for easier related questions instead. This is attribute substitution, and noticing doesn't happen. Someone asks if you're happy with your life. That's complex. Substitution happens for an easier question. How do I feel right now? Current mood answers a question about overall life satisfaction. Asking happens about whether an investment is good. That requires analysis. Substitution happens. Does this feel right? Gut feeling replaces careful evaluation. The substitution happens unconsciously. Belief exists that the actual question got answered. Noticing doesn't happen that switching to something simpler happened. This leads to bad judgments. The easy question isn't the same as the hard question, but the easy answer gets treated as if it addressed the hard question. Complex decisions suffer most. Simple proxies get found for complex evaluations. Choices get made based on those proxies without realizing substitution occurred. The question answered isn't the question that needed answering. Recognition of this pattern can help. When answering important questions, pause and verify. Am I actually answering this question? Or am I answering an easier, different question? The tendency is strong. Hard questions get automatically replaced with easy ones. Conscious effort is needed to stay focused on the actual question. Fact 94. The identifiable victim effect makes individual stories more compelling than statistics. One person with a name and story creates more emotional response than thousands of unnamed people. This is the identifiable victim effect. Statistics about thousands suffering create less motivation to help than a single story about one person suffering. The individual is identifiable. The thousands are abstract. Charities know this. They show you one child with a name and photo. They don't show statistics about millions of children in the same situation. The single identified person motivates giving more than accurate scope would. This creates irrational allocation of resources. More money goes to helping identified individuals than to preventing larger numbers of unidentified people from suffering. The effect happens because emotional systems respond to individuals, not numbers. One person with a face and story activates empathy. Large numbers remain abstract. One death is a tragedy. 1 million deaths is a statistic captures this perfectly. The single death creates feeling. The million deaths create nothing. Understanding this bias doesn't fix it. Even knowing about the effect, emotional response still gravitates toward identified individuals over larger groups. To make better decisions about helping, force attention to scope. Numbers matter. Helping more people is better than helping fewer. But emotional systems won't automatically recognize this. Fact, modifies. The IKEA effect is magnified by near completion. Items you almost finished building feel even more valuable than items you fully completed. This is an intensified form of the IKEA effect. When a project is 90% done, investment feels enormous, but completion hasn't happened yet. This creates peak attachment. The incomplete state plus the effort creates maximum psychological ownership. Completed projects get valued highly because of effort invested. But near-complete projects get valued even higher because the incomplete state creates ongoing mental engagement. This explains why people struggle to abandon projects that are almost done, even when abandoning would be the smart choice. The near completion creates peak attachment. Marketers use this. Free trials that let you partially customize something create attachment before purchase. The partial completion makes you value it more. Video games use this constantly. Showing your 90% to the next level creates motivation to continue. The near completion state is more motivating than either starting fresh or being fully complete. Understanding this can help with decisions about sunk costs. Near completion creates maximum irrational attachment. That's exactly when rational evaluation is most needed but feels most difficult. Fact 96. The verbatim effect makes gist more memorable than details. You remember the general meaning of things better than exact wording. This is the verbatim effect. Reading a paragraph, then recalling it later, creates memory of the gist. Specific words get lost. General meaning remains. This happens because meaning gets processed more deeply than surface features. The gist creates understanding. Exact wording is just the vehicle. This is usually helpful. Meaning matters more than exact wording in most situations. Remembering concepts is more useful than remembering sentences, but it creates problems in some contexts. Legal testimony needs exact wording sometimes. Scientific claims depend on precise language. Financial details require exact numbers. Understanding this can help in important situations. If exact details matter, specific effort needs to happen to encode them. Otherwise, only gist will remain. Taking notes helps. Writing forces attention to specific details that would otherwise get lost. Reviewing notes refreshes both gist and verbatim information. The bias toward gist is strong and usually appropriate, but know when details matter and take specific steps to preserve them. Don't assume detailed memory when only gist is being encoded. Fact 97. The spacing effect makes distributed practice. Better than cramming learning spread over time works much better than learning crammed into one session. This is the spacing effect. Studying for 1 hour each day for a week creates better retention than studying for 7 hours in one day. The total time is the same. The distribution makes the difference. This happens because each repetition strengthens memory more when time has passed. Immediate repetition adds little. Spaced repetition adds a lot. The effect is one of the most reliable findings in memory research. It works for every type of learning. Language, facts, skills, everything benefits from spacing. Yet people still cram. Last-minute studying feels productive. It creates short-term retention for tests. But long-term learning suffers. The optimal spacing isn't equal. Gradually increasing intervals works best. Review after 1 day, then 3 days, then a week, then a month. Understanding this can revolutionize learning. Instead of long single sessions, break learning into shorter sessions spread over time. The same total time produces much better results. The effect is powerful and proven, but it requires planning. Cramming is easier in the moment. Spacing requires foresight. The effort to plan pays off in dramatically better retention. Fact 98. The testing effect makes retrieval practice strengthen memory more than review. Trying to remember information strengthens memory more than reading it again. This is the testing effect. Students who test themselves remember better than students who review material repeatedly. The act of retrieval creates stronger memory than the act of reviewing. This seems backwards. Review feels productive. You're seeing the information. Testing feels harder and less comfortable. You're struggling with partial recall. But the struggle is what creates learning. Successful retrieval strengthens the memory pathway. Unsuccessful attempts identify gaps that need attention. The effect is powerful. One retrieval practice session can be more effective than multiple review sessions of the same material. Yet people avoid testing themselves. It feels unpleasant. Review feels easier and more comfortable, but comfort doesn't predict learning. To use this effectively, after learning something, don't just review it. Close the material and try to recall it. The act of retrieval is what locks it in memory. Flashcards work because they force retrieval. Rereading notes doesn't. The difference in effectiveness is enormous, even though rereading feels more like learning. Fact 99. The generation effect makes self-created information more memorable. Information you generate yourself gets remembered better than information you passively receive. This is the generation effect. Reading a word in a sentence creates weak memory. Filling in a blank with that word creates strong memory. The act of generation strengthens encoding. This explains why taking notes helps, even if you never review them. The act of deciding what to write and writing it creates stronger memory than just listening. It also explains why asking yourself questions about material works better than just reading. Generating answers creates better retention than reading provided answers. The effect works because generation requires deeper processing. You must engage with the material, understand it, and produce something. This creates stronger memory traces. Passive learning feels easier and faster. Active generation feels harder and slower, but the harder, slower process creates much better retention. To use this, don't just consume information. Generate something with it. Explain it in your own words. Create examples. Answer questions. Make connections. The generation will lock it in memory. Teachers can use this too. Students who generate explanations learn better than students who receive explanations. The generation is what creates lasting learning. Fact 100. Your conscious awareness lags behind reality by half a second. What you experience as now is actually already in the past. There's a processing delay of about half a second. Light hits your eyes, sounds hit your ears, touch reaches your skin. All this information takes time to process into conscious awareness. The delay is necessary. Automatic systems need time to assemble sensory input into coherent experience. What reaches awareness is a constructed interpretation, not raw input. This means everything you consciously experience happens slightly in the past. You're always living in the recent past, experiencing it as present. The lag is usually irrelevant. Half a second doesn't matter for most activities, but in fast-moving situations, it can matter. Athletes train to respond to cues before conscious processing completes. Martial artists react to initial movements before consciously registering what's happening. The trained response bypasses the delay. This is why acting on instinct can be faster than thinking it through. Instinct responds to cues before conscious awareness forms. The conscious experience of deciding comes after the response has already begun. Your experience of being present in the moment is actually experience of the recent past. True present is happening before you consciously experience it. You're always slightly behind, experiencing yesterday as today.